Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Coffee with Mr. Karsten. I got my Coffee with Mr. Karsten cup. That's a custom-made cup. Catch Penny Productions made that for me. It's been doing just an amazing job. We've been having a lot of fun putting these YouTube videos together. I got my LSA football shirt on. Got to give a shout out to Coach Bundy and the coaching staff for just an awesome, amazing year that you've had. First-class group of coaches that are doing so much more than just coaching our team, but just leading them into young men and future leaders. And just couldn't be more proud of them and our football team. So by the time you see this Coffee with Mr. Karsten, we will have played our first playoff game for IHSA Class 1A in the school's history and in the 4 years that this varsity program has been alive and well and growing, and just so much to be proud of. Kind of new territory for us, but we'll hopefully see how they can do on October 31st. And you probably will have heard how that day went, but we are so proud of them, and it's been so fun to see some success on our football team. So go Lions. We'll see what we can do on Saturday. Hey, today for Coffee with Mr. Karsten, I've been thinking a lot about this. We talk about our ministry here, K through 12 Christian education, a positive place to develop relationships and educate our children, to offer so many co-curricular programs in addition to the academics. Just recently, you saw a Coffee with Mr. Karsten that talked about our parent surveys and back-to-school surveys, and parents that have been here for the first year or have been here just a couple years or have been here for 3 or more years, talked about the positive things that go on in this ministry. Also, a recent Coffee with Mr. Karsten that we looked at homecoming, and just a lot of fun that the kids have had. But today I want to really get down to the funding part. So important to share with you and to be transparent and share how the budgeting works in the Lutheran School Association. I'll start off by saying every year the school board develops a budget. And in October of every year, we do a budget review meeting. So we keep track of past budgets. We talk about what the current budget looks like as the school board has gone through this for several months. We keep track of enrollment, and we keep track of enrollment history, and we keep track of how much money comes in from our churches. We'll talk about that here in a second. And just so much more that helps us each year decide what does tuition look like, and what do fees look like, and what are the programs that we're going to be able to offer. So today on Coffee with Mr. Karsten, I want to talk a little bit about the school budget and break that down for you. Our LSA budget actually is made up of 5, I would say, sub-budgets that make up our unified budget. We have about a $3 million budget to run the entire organization that we call the Lutheran School Association. The budget is made up of the lunch program, the ABC program, which is our before and after school care, our resale shop down on Cerro Gordo Street. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then really the 2 biggest parts of our unified budget is one end of the building, the elementary K through 8 operations, and the other end of the building, the high school operations. Lunch and ABC I want to start with first. Really, those fund themselves. We try to determine how much things cost and how much we're going to have to charge families, but it really comes down to the amount of lunches that we sell funds the lunch program, and the amount of before and after school care that families use and purchase funds our ABC. I want to talk about the resale shop. The resale shop budget also just funds itself. So many people in the community and our churches and our school donate items to our resale shop. And for those of you who are just first time hearing this, we have a resale shop. It's an amazing place down on Cerro Gordo Street in downtown Decatur. Donations are accepted all the time. Furniture, household items, clothing, anything that you might have at your house that you might put out for like a garage sale or a resale shop type opportunity. You could donate that to the LSA resale shop. The resale shop is an amazing outreach from this ministry out into the community. But it's not just for families that you would say might need to go shop there. Certainly it's a blessing to them. but you'll be amazed and surprised if you go in there yourself at how nice some of the items are in there. So Sir Gordo Street and the resale shop, that more than funds itself, and it actually helps fund parts of the ministry here. We take volunteers down there, so our parent volunteer hours could be used down at the LSA resale shop. And quite frankly, we have some wonderful staff down there, but we could not do what we do in the resale shop without great volunteers. And there's a lot of them that come from the churches and our parents. So let's talk about the two main parts, and this will take up the most time here on today's Coffee with Mr. Karsten. It's the elementary budget and the high school budget. The elementary budget income comes from tuition and fees, church assessment dollars, and donations, while the high school is funded on tuition and fees and just some donations. So let's break that down and take a look at what each of those two budgets look like. The elementary budget is a $1,977,000 budget. And let me give you some approximations on this income. About half of that $1.9 million comes from the 5 Lutheran churches that are part of this association here in Decatur. That by itself is an amazing statistic. The amount of dollars that the churches put into their school to make what goes on here possible, and to help keep tuition down for both their members and our community members that come to the LSA. So about half of the $1.9 million comes from our churches. About another $800,000 comes from tuition and fees through the elementary parents. And then about $160,000, or about 8%, is also coming from donations. Those could be donations to operations. Those could be donations toward financial aid. But we obviously do rely on people supporting the LSA through their donations as part of operating our school. The operations, the scholarships, the mortgage debt, are all ways that people have made donations over the years to help ministry take place. Let's talk about a little bit about the budgeted areas. In $1.9 million, about 20% of that goes into the building operations, so about $392,000. And then about the other 80% of the budget goes into instruction, programs, staff, and administration. So you'll probably see a breakdown of about $6,900 per student is what it costs to educate our kids in the K through 8 operations of the LSA. We obviously don't get that all in tuition, so it does go back to the amount of church support and the amount of donations that come in to help us run the school. Athletics are a part of the budget, but I want to kind of separate that, and you'll hear me talk about this in the high school too. One of the typical questions that we get is, do the dollars that go toward athletics take away from any of the operations or the academics in the school operations part? And the answer is no. We have an athletic program that is actually self-funded through the fees that we charge our athletes and through the gate and concessions money that comes in through athletic programs. We see that athletics is really separate and self-funded, but it is part of that $1.9 million that you see. A second question that comes up in terms of athletics is usually the amount of money that's spent on facilities and equipment. And a lot of those are from restricted donations. Donations that wouldn't necessarily have been given otherwise have made it possible to put baseball fields up and lights on a football field and bleachers and some of those kinds of things. So those are above and beyond this $1.9 million. And again, we couldn't do those facility enhancements for our sports programs without separate restricted donation. So let me backtrack just a little bit. The amount of support that comes from our churches is amazing, and it helps us operate the school. Some of the things that I would note for especially our church members of those churches, whether you have a student at LSA or not, continuing to emphasize the support that you give to the churches ends up coming in as support toward the school. Supporting the churches, putting your tithes and your offerings into the offering plate, making those additional donations as part of school donations and operations, and volunteering, both volunteers at our churches and volunteers at the school, all are part of making this possible. While those may not always translate into dollars, people's time and efforts and prayers are just as important as the dollars are, and obviously the dollars, as we've outlined them today, are extremely important. So that's kind of an overview of the elementary. Let's talk a little bit about the high school budget. The high school budget is an interesting one because our high school actually uses the facility here, but our churches have always viewed the building operations as we would have this building regardless of a high school being at the other end of the building. So there's a little bit different high school budget here. The income comes, as I mentioned, from tuition and fees and donations. Actually, it's about 80% that comes from tuition and fees and about 20% that comes from donations. It's a $945,000 budget at the high school end. About 150 students down there compared to the 285 students, so about double. And so you can see about a $1 million budget in the high school and about a $2 million budget at the elementary kind of makes some sense. Comes out to just over $6,200 per student as the cost to educate our kids. Again, looking at the donations as an important part of the income, the tuition and fees does not cover all operations. The donations that come in help us keep the tuition where it's at. Breaking down the high school budget, about 92% of that budget is in staffing and programs, and about 8% is in the building. That number continues to grow and has grown in the 7 years that I've been here. We've continued to add utilities and portions of those building costs to the high school as the high school has grown. And I think that has helped to subsidize and support the elementary budget. We spend a lot of time explaining what the difference is between the elementary and high school budget, but I think all of us have come to know that this is a K through 12 school, and it's a K through 12 budget that we help make possible through donations, through our churches, and through tuition and fees. So if you continue on some overall thoughts, you can really see the importance of the support of our churches. But let me go into the enrollment side. Enrollment is the key. Our fixed costs don't change much when enrollment goes down. Our fixed costs, when we have additional room in most of our classrooms, those fixed costs are there, so we have room to add a few more students. Back to something I said at the very beginning of this Coffee with Mr. Karsten, remember our parent surveys. Remember the reason that people are here and the reason that they're happy with the education and the atmosphere that they're receiving. You can go out and tell another family. Our referral program and telling other families about our experiences is probably one of the most important things that we'll continue to talk about over the next couple of months. And we're going to use Coffee with Mr. Karsten to do that. But enrollment, having room in a classroom or in a grade level to add without adding additional costs. Don't want to turn people and kids into money. That certainly depersonalizes our ministry. But additional kids and the right kids that are looking to add something to this school. We talk about being a blessing to kids, but we know that kids come in here and are a blessing to this school. Additional students in this building will generate other income to help operate our school. Important parts of ministry, supporting by the churches, and enrollment are really key parts that you want to continue to hear us talk about today. So I want to go into some typical questions. Typical questions that are asked: does certain money given take away from other operations? I mentioned athletics. That is about a self-funded and donation-funded program. We put a lot of emphasis on sports, but it's sports that really get the most attention through the news and through the media. creates excitement. It creates school spirit. It just creates a lot of positive in our school. It does not mean that music and art and drama and athletic or academics are not important, but those athletics are not being funded by those operational dollars. They're being funded by additional fees to the athletes and their families, and they are funded by donations that would have not necessarily otherwise been given. Another typical question, who decides on the budget? It's the school board. We actually have a process, and there's a rhyme and a reason to our re-enrollment process. We ask our families to re-enroll and tell us about their coming year plans starting in February. And so in February and March, we'll reach out to new families and to new potential kindergarten families. We'll reach out to our current LSA families and ask them to re-enroll. So that process in February, March, and April really does unfold to see if we need to add teachers or if we, on some years don't need as many teachers. And it's kind of a negative way to talk about staffing, but in terms of the budget, we have to make some prudent, responsible decisions each year. I always use the example of, how are you going to know if you need 3 kindergarten teachers instead of just 2? We typically fill those 2 kindergarten classes every year, but what if we needed a 3rd kindergarten teacher? Our process of budgeting and our process of deciding why we would add a new teacher has something to do with our enrollment. Another typical question, and this gets kind of personal, but I'm going to share that with you today. Someone asks me, and I get the question, do teachers and staff get raises? I want to tell you that the budget's been tight in the last couple of years, and we haven't been able to give raises to our teachers in the last 4 years. That's probably true of a lot of businesses around the country, but it is a true statement here. We don't give these exorbitant amount of raises to our staff. I wish that we could, and in the future, our school board is going to have to continue to assess that. But our teachers don't get raises, and yet they give an amount of time and energy and love and effort that just really makes ministry happen here. Are there shared positions in the budget, and how does that work? As I mentioned, the elementary and high school budget, there are shared positions. A school nurse that's shared between the high school and the elementary, an executive director that serves both the elementary and the high school, athletic director, maintenance positions, anything that's really shared between the high school and the elementary, a portion of that goes toward both budgets. And then one final question, health costs and healthcare costs. Those are affecting businesses nationwide. We've had a 35% increase over the last 4 years. So those expenses that do tend to rise each year, and then even some years where an enrollment might go down, income going down, and costs going up, especially in terms of healthcare costs, is always something that our board is looking at and concerned about. Going out back to that enrollment and telling another family, helping us grow the size of the school will be things that we'll talk and encourage our families to be a part of. So how can you help? Let me say that enrollment and admissions thing one more time. Tell another family about LSA. There are blessings that you are experiencing as a family every single day, and a family in your neighborhood, at your church, at the place where you work. Someone is going to ask you about an LSA sweatshirt or t-shirt or piece of jewelry that you are wearing. Encourage those families to come and take a tour and see for themselves if LSA could be a blessing. Other ways that you can help, we'll be sending some things home either through the mail or through some student book bags, asking for those that can to make a donation. Make a donation toward operations, make a donation toward student financial aid. make a donation through attending some of our events, like the golf outing that was in September, attending our auction that'll come up in usually March or April. Your business could be a gym banner sponsor. Those are dollars that could benefit both the business and advertising and give dollars toward the LSA operations. There's just a huge amount of ways that you could help the school. Telling a family or making a donation are some things that we mentioned today. So my final thought here is really back to some of the first things we said. Our ministry takes place here, and families that were surveyed to start the year are extremely pleased. They're choosing a school for a reason, and they're experiencing a school for a reason. These past couple of days, we've had parent-teacher conferences, and parents and teachers sitting down together in a partnership of educating their kids. And to sit down and look at how we can continue to minister and serve families is taking place in these parent-teacher conferences. The academics, the programs, and especially the atmosphere and the relationships, they're all taking place here. And what we tried to do in this Coffee with Mr. Karsten is summarize that it does cost money. And those budgets, God provides, God uses you, God uses other donors, God uses other families, and you included, to be a part of funding this place. So look to maybe share some of this information with others that might ask. But hopefully today, the Coffee with Mr. Karsten gave a little bit of background, probably a lot of background in detail about the funding and how this works here at the LSA. Always willing to talk to you more about some of those things, or if you wanted to sit down and really see where your donations can make the greatest benefit. But it's been Coffee with Mr. Karsten, just talking the budget and funding this ministry at the Lutheran School Association. Hopefully it was helpful for you to hear those things today. And as always, it's been a pleasure to come together and have another Coffee with Mr. Karsten today. To God be the glory.